The old black janitor at the SEAL training facility had endured their mockery for months. Gramps, they called him, as they knocked over his mop bucket and laughed. They never noticed how he studied their drills with military precision, how he moved with unexpected strength when no one was watching. It wasn't until recruit Cole Rollins spotted the distinctive trident tattoo on his side, marked with numbers no current SEAL would recognize, that the truth began to surface. Elijah Rowe wasn't just some hired help. He was a ghost returned from a secret war, a phantom echo operator the government had tried to erase. And his presence threatened powerful men who thought their darkest secrets had stayed buried in Cambodian jungles decades ago. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The morning sun cast long shadows across the SEAL training compound as a rusted pickup truck rumbled to a stop at the gates. The driver, a weathered local who made deliveries to the base, gestured to the passenger door. "This is as far as I go, old-timer. Base is right through there." Elijah Rowe nodded silently, gathering his worn duffel bag before stepping out into the heat. The truck pulled away, leaving him standing alone before the imposing gates of the YAO, Naval Special Warfare Training Facility. His weathered dark skin had seen decades of sun, his frame thin but wiry, and his eyes, those were what struck people most. Deep-set and observant, missing nothing. The guard at the checkpoint eyed him, with mild confusion. "Help you?" "I'm expected," Elijah said, his voice a low gravel. He produced a folded paper from his pocket. "Custodial staff." The guard scanned the document with obvious disinterest. "Huh. Nobody told me about a new hire." He made a call and, after a brief conversation, waved Elijah through with a dismissive gesture. "Report to Building C. Someone will show you around." Elijah stepped onto the compound grounds, his gait steady and deliberate. The facility bustled with activity. Young recruits running obstacle courses, instructors barking orders, the distant crack of gunfire from the range. None spared a glance for the old man with the duffel bag. In Building C, a harried administrative assistant looked up from her desk, surprise flickering across her face. "You must be the new maintenance worker," she said, checking her computer. "Says here you're assigned through the civilian contractor pool, but..." She frowned at the screen. "It doesn't say who specifically authorized your hiring." "Does it matter?" Elijah asked quietly. She hesitated, then shrugged. "Guess not. We need the help. Storage room behind the mess hall has a cot. Probably not what you're used to, but it'll do fine," Elijah cut in, the hint of a smile never reaching his eyes. That afternoon, Elijah began his work quietly. He mopped floors with precise, methodical strokes, cleaned mud from boots left outside barracks doors, and fixed a leaking pipe in the showers without being asked. He moved through the compound like a shadow, speaking only when spoken to, and even then, in the briefest terms possible. By dinner time, his presence had been noted by the recruits, particularly a tight-knit group gathered around a young man, with cold blue eyes and the confident posture of someone who'd never truly been challenged. "Check out Grandpa," Cole Rollins snickered, nodding toward Elijah as he carefully wiped down tables in the corner of the mess hall. "What did they do, Raid? The retirement home for janitors?" His buddies laughed, loud enough for Elijah to hear, though the old man gave no indication he was listening. "Bet he can't even lift the mop bucket," another recruit added, earning more laughter. At a nearby table sat Logan Vance, his posture perfect, his features sharp and calculating. Unlike the others, he didn't laugh. He watched Elijah with something closer to contempt. "What's a man like that even doing here?" he muttered to no one in particular. "This is the most elite training program in the world, not some charity case for senior citizens." Logan was a second-year recruit, already marked for leadership. His father's company, Vance Defense Technologies, held major contracts with the ES, Department of Defense. Everyone knew Logan was destined for command, possibly beyond the military into the corridors of power his family already navigated. While the men jeered, one of the few female recruits in the program, Raina Cruz, observed. In silence, she noted how Elijah returned each cleaning tool to its exact position, how his movements were deliberate and economical. Nothing wasted, Nothing excessive. It reminded her of something, though she couldn't quite place it. When the mess hall emptied, Cole and two others lingered behind. They waited until Elijah was carrying his bucket toward the utility closet before Cole stuck out his foot. The water sloshed over Elijah's pants and shoes. "Oops," Cole said with mock innocence. "Guess you missed a spot, Gramps." Elijah looked down at the water, then at Cole, his expression unchanged. He simply set the bucket down and began mopping, again. "What's wrong, old man? Too scared to say something?" one of Cole's friends taunted. Elijah continued working as if they weren't there. The lack of reaction seemed to irritate them more than anger would have. "Let's help him out," Cole suggested, with a smirk. He grabbed a handful of ketchup packets from a nearby table and squeezed them onto the floor Elijah had just cleaned. "There. Now you've got something to keep you busy until bedtime." The recruits laughed as they left, high-fiving each other. Elijah waited until they were gone before cleaning up the mess without complaint or hurry. From the doorway, Master Chief Instructor Barnes watched the scene unfold. He could have intervened but chose not to. Instead, he made a note in his mental file about Cole's behavior, not as a disciplinary concern, but as an observation of character. "This is SEAL training," he muttered to himself as he walked away. "If the old man can't handle a little hazing, he shouldn't be here." That evening, as darkness fell over the compound, Elijah made his way to the tiny storage room that would serve as his quarters. The space was barely large enough for the cot and his duffel, with a small shelf and a naked bulb overhead. He sat on the edge of the cot, rubbing his side where an old injury pulled at his skin. Outside, voices drifted through the thin walls. Elijah recognized Logan Vance's controlled tone immediately. "No, I don't think anyone suspects anything," Logan was saying, his voice hushed but clear to Elijah's trained ear. "But that old man shouldn't be here. If he remembers anything, it could ruin the project." A pause then. "Yes, sir. I understand. I'll keep an eye on him." Elijah's face remained impassive, but his eyes hardened. When the footsteps faded, he carefully pulled up a loose floorboard beneath his cot. From his duffel, he removed a cloth-wrapped bundle and placed it in the hiding space. Before covering it again, his fingers brushed over the contents. An old SEAL badge, worn with years of handling, and a faded photograph of 6 men in jungle camouflage, their faces smudged with tactical paint. "They're trying to erase us," he whispered to the silent room. "But ghosts don't disappear so easily." The next morning, as dawn broke over the compound, 2 recruits struggled to move a heavy machine part for the obstacle course. Sweat poured down their faces as they attempted to lift the metal contraption. "Need a hand?" a voice called. They turned, expecting to see one of the instructors, only to find Elijah standing there, mop in hand. One recruit snorted. "No offense, Pops, but if we can't lift it..." Before he could finish, Elijah set down his mop, bent at the knees, and hoisted the metal piece onto his shoulder in one fluid motion. The recruits gaped as he carried it to the designated spot and set it down with precision. "All about leverage," Elijah said quietly, then picked up his mop and continued on his way. Later that day, as recruits ran drills on the firing range, a sudden explosion from a flashbang grenade used in the adjacent tactical training area caused everyone to flinch. Elijah, who had been sweeping nearby, froze. For a brief moment, his eyes widened, seeing not the training compound, but dense jungle, foliage, hearing not practice rounds but the real thing. The screams of villagers, the smell of burning thatch, the sickening thud of bodies hitting mud. His hand instinctively moved to his side, where shrapnel had torn through flesh decades ago. A recruit noticed and smirked, misreading the reaction as fear rather than a combat veteran's flashback. "Scared of a little noise, Gramps?" the young man called out. Elijah straightened, the moment passing as quickly as it had come, and resumed his sweeping without acknowledgement. That night, as the compound fell quiet, Elijah sat alone in his tiny room. He removed the floorboard again and took out the photograph, studying the faces of men who had been his brothers in all but blood, men whose existence had been systematically erased from official records. "Still here," he whispered to them, "still watching." The morning sky bloomed with streaks of orange and pink as Reyna Cruz assembled her rifle for marksmanship training. She'd always been meticulous, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, but something felt off. The sight wobbled slightly when she tested it, almost imperceptible, but enough to affect accuracy at distance. "Your forward mount is loose," a quiet voice said behind her. Cruz turned to find Elijah standing there, a bucket of cleaning supplies in hand. He nodded toward her rifle, then continued walking past. "Check your 6, always," he added without looking back. Cruz examined the forward mount and found it was indeed loose, something she might not have noticed until failure on the range. She tightened it, then watched Elijah's retreating form with newfound curiosity. Later that day, Cruz found Elijah's mop bucket filled with used motor oil instead of cleaning solution. She saw him discover it, saw the flicker of resignation cross his features before he quietly emptied it and refilled it properly. No complaints, no seeking out the culprits. That night, Cruz was heading back to her barracks when she glimpsed Elijah through the partially open door of the maintenance shed. He sat hunched over something small, his large hands surprisingly gentle. Curiosity getting the better of her, she moved closer and saw a tiny sparrow nestled in a makeshift nest of rags. Its wing was clearly injured. Elijah carefully applied a homemade splint to the bird's wing, using what looked like a popsicle stick and strips of gauze. The tenderness in his movement stood in stark contrast to his usual stoic demeanor. Cruz stepped on a twig, and Elijah's head snapped up, eyes instantly alert. When he saw her, his expression didn't change, but his body relaxed slightly. "Found it in the trash pit," he explained without being asked. "Someone's boot, probably." Cruz nodded. "I won't tell anyone." A hint of something, possibly gratitude, flickered in Elijah's eyes before he returned his attention to the bird. The next morning, Cole Rollins was boasting loudly during pool training. "This underwater endurance test? Piece of cake. I can hold my breath longer than anyone here." Elijah was mopping nearby and paused momentarily. "Don't exhale under pressure," he said quietly, almost to himself. Cole sneered. "Did I ask for your advice, old man?" Hours later, during the dive simulation, Cole found himself in trouble. Ignoring the training protocol, he'd exhaled too much before a pressure change. Panic set in as his lungs screamed for air, his vision tunneling. The instructor pulled him out just before he lost consciousness. As Cole coughed up water on the pool deck, he caught sight of Elijah cleaning windows on the far side of the natatorium, the old man's eyes reflecting neither satisfaction nor concern. Simply awareness. That afternoon, while raking leaves near the training field, Elijah spotted something glinting in the dirt. He bent down and retrieved a dog tag that had fallen from one of the recruits' necks. Instead of turning it into the administration office, he pocketed it. That night, he carefully polished it until the name shone clearly, then placed it anonymously on the recruit's bunk. The following day, Elijah stood before the Wall of Honor in the main administration building. Rows of photographs displayed the faces of distinguished graduates and fallen heroes. His eyes fixed on an empty space, a spot where a photograph had clearly been removed. The hook remained, but the frame was gone. "They took even his name," he muttered. A young recruit passing by slowed, overhearing the comment, but Elijah quickly resumed his cleaning as if nothing had happened. That night, Elijah returned to his storage room to find the door ajar. Inside, his few possessions had been rummaged through, drawers pulled open, his mattress askew. But the loose floorboard appeared untouched. Carefully checking his hidden cache, he found everything intact. However, sitting atop his pillow was a folded note. "Stop digging up the past, or be buried with it." Elijah burned the note in the small trash can outside, watching the paper curl and blacken until nothing remained but ash. Meanwhile, in a sleek office trailer on the compound perimeter, Logan Vance sat across from a man in an expensive suit. Malcolm Pryor wore his authority like cologne, too strongly and detectable from a distance. His silver hair was immaculately styled, his posture military perfect despite his civilian status. "Your father's impressed with your progress," Pryor said, sliding a folder across the desk. The recruit evaluation metrics you provided were extremely helpful for our selection process. Logan skimmed the contents. These operations aren't officially sanctioned. They're necessary, Pryor corrected. Some missions are too sensitive for official channels. Your father understands that. The compound is our perfect recruiting ground. We identify the right kind of operators, the ones who can think beyond conventional restraints. And the old man? Elijah Rowe? Pryor's expression hardened. A complication. Keep watching him. Report anything unusual. If he starts connecting with any of the recruits, particularly about Cambodia, I need to know immediately. The next day, during a forced march in punishing heat, one of the younger recruits collapsed. His body temperature had spiked dangerously, and he lay convulsing on the ground as the instructor radioed for the medical team. Before anyone could react, Elijah appeared from the nearby groundskeeping shed. He dropped to his knees beside the recruit and quickly loosened the young man's collar and belt. He elevated the recruit's feet, then pulled a bandana from his pocket, soaked it with water from his canteen, and placed it on specific pulse points. Behind the neck, at the wrists, and on the temples. By the time the medical team arrived, the recruit's condition had stabilized. The lead medic looked at Elijah in surprise. How did you know to do that? Those are jungle field techniques for heat exhaustion. Elijah simply shrugged. Seen it before, he said, then walked away as the medics took over. That evening, Cruz sat, with a small group of recruits around a small fire pit, enjoying a rare moment of downtime. The conversation turned to military legends, stories of impossible missions and heroic operators. My father told me a story once, Cruz said. Her voice low. He served in Vietnam and he swore it was true. There was a SEAL who led unauthorized rescue operations in Cambodia, the kind of missions that officially never happened. The recruits leaned in closer as she continued. They called him a ghost soldier. No name in the reports, no recognition. Just rumors that when American POWs were abandoned for political reasons, this one operator would go in anyway. According to my father, he saved dozens of lives that the government had written off. Sounds like bullshit, one recruit scoffed. No one operates alone like that. My father wasn't a man who believed in fairy tales, Cruz replied firmly. He said this SEAL moved like a shadow, never spoke much but could read terrain and people with uncanny precision. Said he had this way of watching everything, missing nothing. Always returned his gear to exact positions. The description hung in the air, and several recruits involuntarily glanced toward the maintenance shed, where Elijah was known to work late into the night. The next morning, Elijah was fixing a broken pipe in the shower facility when Cole entered, still toweling off after swimming laps. Elijah kept working, halfway under the sink cabinet, his shirt riding up slightly as he reached for a wrench. Cole's eyes caught something on Elijah's exposed side, a tattoo partially visible beneath an old scar. It appeared to be the distinctive Navy SEAL trident, but with something unusual underneath it, the numbers 6874 and an emblem Cole didn't recognize. Before Cole could get a better look, Elijah pulled his shirt down and slid out from under the sink. Their eyes met briefly, and Cole felt an unexpected chill at the intensity of the old man's gaze. Later that day, his curiosity piqued. Cole lingered after hours in the computer lab. When the instructor stepped out, he quickly accessed a restricted training terminal, searching for any references to the odd emblem he'd glimpsed. His search turned up heavily redacted files mentioning something called Operation Firewall and a codename, Phantom Echo. Cole downloaded what little information he could find onto a flash drive before logging out, his mind racing with questions. What was Phantom Echo, and how did the old janitor have a SEAL tattoo? Meanwhile, Cruz had been conducting her own investigation. Her father's military connections gave her access to recently declassified document indexes, and she found a match. Phantom Echo appeared in a brief appendix related to POW rescue missions in Southeast Asia, missions that, according to the footnotes, were never officially authorized or acknowledged. The next morning, Cole cornered Elijah near the equipment shed. I saw your tattoo, he said without preamble. The trident. You were a SEAL. Elijah's expression remained neutral as he organized tools on a workbench. I also found references to Phantom Echo, Cole continued, and Operation Firewell. At this, Elijah's hands stilled momentarily. He turned to face Cole, his eyes measuring the young recruit with new intensity. "Don't ask questions you're not brave enough to hear the answer to," Elijah said, his voice carrying a weight Cole hadn't heard before. From the corner of the training yard, Logan Vance watched the interaction with narrowed eyes. He pulled out his phone and sent a text message. "Rollins and Cruz snooping. Old man talking. Need to accelerate the timetable." That night, as the compound fell quiet, Elijah sat alone in his quarters, his eyes closed, memory taking him back decades. Jungle. Moonlight filtering through dense canopy. War paint darkening his young face as he crawled through underbrush. Silenced weapons. The flash of a knife. Explosives placed with surgical precision. Then, the faces of prisoners, emaciated and disbelieving as he cut their restraints. The radio crackling with orders from command. "Abort mission. Political situation changed. Leave the hostages. Return to extraction point." And his own voice, clear and defiant. "Negative. Mission continues. All assets extracted." The memory faded as Elijah opened his eyes. On his cot lay a dead crow, its neck broken. Beneath it, a note. "Ghosts can die again too." With practiced calm, Elijah wrapped the bird in cloth and took it outside. Behind the maintenance shed, he dug a small hole next to where he had buried the sparrow days earlier. He placed the crow inside, covered it with dirt, and burned the threatening note. As he turned to go back inside, he spotted Cruz standing in the shadows, watching. "You've been busy," he said quietly. She stepped forward. "I found something in the archives. A letter addressed to you, returned as undeliverable." The envelope was stamped, "Recipient disavowed." Elijah's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Inside was a metal recommendation, Cruz continued, and a sticky note that said, "No recognition, no controversy." Elijah studied her face. "Be careful, Recruit Cruz. People who ask too many questions about Phantom Echo tend to disappear." "Like Jackson did?" Cruz asked. "He was defending you yesterday to the other recruits. Today they're saying he voluntarily dropped out, but his gear is still in his locker and his car's still in the parking lot." Elijah's jaw tightened. "Go back to your barracks. Forget what you've seen and heard." "I can't do that," Cruz replied firmly. "Not anymore." Before Elijah could respond, the mess hall door banged open. Logan Vance strode in with several of his cronies, headed straight for the food line where Elijah's dinner tray waited. With deliberate slowness, Logan picked up Elijah's tray and dumped its contents onto the floor. "Clean it up, old man," he sneered. "That's what you're here for, isn't it?" The room fell silent. Every recruit watched as Elijah looked down at the scattered food, then back at Logan's challenging stare. "You should pray you never have to learn why I kept my hands to myself," Elijah said quietly. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Logan's face. Something in Elijah's tone, not threatening but absolutely certain, sent a chill through the room. Logan recovered quickly, forcing a laugh as he walked away with his friends. But Cruz had seen it, that moment of doubt, and she knew the balance in the compound had just shifted in ways no one yet understood. The morning after Logan's confrontation with Elijah, the compound buzzed with whispered conversations. Word of the old man's ominous response had spread through the barracks overnight. Many recruits who had previously joined in the mockery now regarded Elijah with wary curiosity. Cole Rollins couldn't shake the image of the tattoo he'd glimpsed on Elijah's side. The seal trident was unmistakable, but those numbers, 6874, and that strange emblem beneath it, haunted his thoughts. During their morning run, he fell into step beside Cruz. "I need to talk to you," he said between measured breaths. "About the old man." Cruz gave him a sidelong glance. "What about him?" "Not here," Cole replied, noticing Logan watching them from several yards back. "Meet me behind the equipment shed after lights out." That evening, Cole waited anxiously in the shadows. Cruz appeared silently, making him jump when she spoke. You're jumpy for a future SEAL. Jesus, he hissed. Don't do that. What's so important you're risking demerits for breaking curfew? She asked. Cole glanced around before speaking. I saw a tattoo on Elijah's side yesterday. A SEAL trident, but with numbers and some kind of old emblem underneath. Cruz's expression sharpened. What numbers? 6874. Mean anything to you? Years, maybe? Cruz suggested. Vietnam era, extending into post-war operations. That's not all, Cole continued. I did some digging in the restricted terminal. Found mentions of something called Operation Firewall and a code name, Phantom Echo. Heavily redacted, but I downloaded what I could find. He pulled out a flash drive and handed it to Cruz. Everything's encrypted, but I thought your computer skills might... Quiet, Cruz whispered suddenly, pulling Cole deeper into the shadows. Footsteps approached, then passed by. Logan, Vance, and 2 instructors were making a late-night inspection round. What's he doing with the instructors at this hour? Cole whispered when they were gone. Vance has connections, Cruz replied. His father's company, Vance Defense Technologies, has its fingers in everything military. Rumor is they're running private operations beyond Pentagon oversight. You think this is connected to Elijah somehow? I'm going to find out, Cruz said, pocketing the flash drive. Tomorrow, act normal. Don't draw attention. The next day, Cruz managed to access a secure terminal during her administrative duty, shift. The flash drive contained fragments of classified reports, most redacted to near uselessness, but one document caught her eye, a declassified memo referencing Phantom Echo protocols for denied area extractions in Cambodia, Laos, and adjacent territories. Further down, a partial sentence remained visible through the redactions. PAWI rescue missions never officially authorized or acknowledged due to cross-border implications and potential diplomatic. Cruz stared at the screen, pieces falling into place, the missing photo on the wall of honor. The returned medal recommendation stamped, recipient disavowed, Elijah's jungle field medicine techniques. That afternoon, while helping sort tools in the maintenance shed, Cole deliberately created an opportunity to speak with Elijah alone. I need to ask you about the tattoo, he said without preamble. Elijah's hands paused briefly over a socket wrench before continuing their work. The trident, Cole pressed, with the numbers 6874, and that emblem. It's not current issue. I checked. Elijah turned to face him, his eyes measuring. Don't ask questions you're not brave enough to hear the answer to. Try me, Cole challenged, standing his ground despite the sudden intensity in Elijah's gaze. Some ghosts should stay buried, boy. Is that what you are? A ghost? Cole asked. We found references to Phantom Echo and Operation Firewall. Were you there, Cambodia? A muscle tightened in Elijah's jaw. Who's we? Cruz and me. We're not the enemy here. You don't know who the enemy is, Elijah replied, voice dropping lower. That's the problem. Before Cole could respond, the shed door opened. Logan stood there, his expression cold. Rawlins. Commander wants to see you about that missing gear report. Cole hesitated, looking between Logan and Elijah. Now, Rawlins, Logan barked. After Cole left, Logan lingered in the doorway, studying Elijah. Getting friendly with the recruits, old man? Not wise. Elijah continued organizing tools, seemingly indifferent to Logan's presence. You know, Logan continued, this facility has standards, protocols. We can't have unauthorized personnel interfering with training, especially those with compromised histories. He waited for a reaction that never came, then added, enjoy your time here while it lasts, before turning to leave. From his vantage point in the administration building, Malcolm Pryor watched the interaction through binoculars. He lowered them, lifted his phone, and spoke quietly. The old man is making connections. Accelerate the timeline, and find out everything you can about recruits Rawlins and Cruz. That night, as Elijah slept, fragments of memory invaded his dreams. Cambodia, 1971. moonlight glinting on rivulets of sweat as he crawled through dense jungle underbrush. 3 men behind him, faces darkened with tactical paint. The distant glow of a prison camp. Guards with Soviet-made rifles. Radio crackles. Phantom Echo, this is Control. Mission abort. Repeat. Mission abort. Political situation has changed. Return to extraction point. His younger self, pressing the radio to his ear. Negative Control. American prisoners confirmed. On site. Proceeding with extraction. That is a direct order, Phantom Echo. The mission is scrubbed. His response, clear and firm. Sometimes you have to disobey an order to follow your oath. Static. Then, you're on your own, Echo. No support. No extraction. No acknowledgement if captured. The memory shifted. The heat of explosions. The precision of silenced weapons. The faces of emaciated prisoners as restraints fell away. Then, betrayal. An extraction never meant to succeed. A team abandoned. Elijah woke with a start, sweat soaking, his shirt despite the cool night air. Outside his window, a shadow moved, someone watching. He remained motionless, controlling his breathing, giving no indication he'd noticed. The next morning, Cruz found an unmarked envelope slipped under her barracks door. Inside was a single page, a letter dated 1974, addressed to Elijah Rowe. The letterhead bore the seal of the Navy Cross Committee. For extraordinary heroism in connection with operations against opposing armed forces, above and beyond the call of duty. The rest was redacted, but at the bottom, handwritten in faded ink. No recognition. No controversy. Per White House directive. Cruz's hands trembled slightly. She carefully refolded the letter and tucked it securely into her boot. Later that day, she noticed a recruit named Jensen was missing from formation. "Where's Jensen?" she asked another recruit. "Dropped out last night. Voluntary withdrawal." Cruz frowned. "That doesn't make sense. He scored top marks in water training yesterday." The other recruit shrugged. "That's what they're saying. His bunk's already cleared out." Cruz remembered Jensen had been one of the few who'd spoken up when others mocked. Elijah. A chill ran down her spine as she recalled Elijah's warning. People who ask too many questions about Phantom Echo tend to disappear. That evening in the mess hall, tension built to breaking point. Logan approached Elijah as he quietly ate his dinner at a corner table. "You know what I can't figure out?" Logan said loudly, ensuring others would hear. "Why they'd let someone like you anywhere near this facility." Elijah continued eating without acknowledging Logan's presence. Irritated by the lack of response, Logan knocked Elijah's tray to the floor, food splattering across the polished concrete. "I'm talking to you, old man," Logan snarled. The mess hall fell silent. Every recruit and instructor watched as Elijah looked calmly at the spilled food, then up at Logan's challenging stare. "You should pray you never have to learn why I keep my hands to myself," Elijah said quietly. Something in his voice, not threatening but absolutely certain, made several recruits shift uncomfortably in their seats. Logan's face flushed with anger at the repeated phrase. "Is that a threat?" he demanded. "No," Elijah replied, rising slowly to his feet. "It's experience talking." For a fleeting moment, the stooped custodian seemed to straighten, his presence filling the space in a way that made even Logan take a half step back. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the transformation was gone. Elijah bent to clean up the mess, once again just an old man doing his job. Later that night, Cruz approached Commander Briggs outside his office, clutching the Navy Cross letter. "Sir, I need to speak with you about something." Briggs looked up from his paperwork with impatience. "It's after hours, Recruit Cruz. It's about Elijah Rowe, sir, and Operation Firewell." Briggs froze, his expression shifting from annoyance to something sharper. He glanced around the empty hallway, then gestured Cruz inside his office and closed the door. "Where did you hear that name?" he demanded quietly. "Sir, I found this," Cruz said, placing the letter on his desk. "And Cole Rollins discovered references to Phantom Echo in the classified database." Briggs stared at the letter, his face paling slightly. "You need to stop this investigation immediately," he said, his voice tight. "For your own good. Sir, with respect, there's something wrong happening here. Recruits who associate with Rowe are disappearing. Jensen is gone. Jackson vanished last week. That's enough, Cruz," Briggs cut in. "Return to your barracks and forget about this. That's an order." Cruz straightened, weighing her next words carefully. "Sir, if Elijah Rowe was a SEAL who served his country, why is his record being erased? Why is he being treated this way?" Briggs stared at her for a long moment, then sighed, suddenly looking older than his years. "Some wars never make it into the history books, Cruz. Some missions never happened officially. Leave it alone." He walked her to the door, but as she left, he added quietly, "Lock your footlocker tonight. Don't trust anyone." Cruz returned to her barracks, mind racing. Briggs hadn't denied her allegations. If anything, his warning confirmed them. She found Cole waiting anxiously outside. "What did Briggs say?" he whispered as they walked toward a secluded area near the obstacle course. "He told me to stop digging." "But the way he said it—" She paused. "He knows something, Cole. And he's scared." "Why would a base commander be scared?" "I don't know, but—" Cruz stopped mid-sentence, noticing a manila envelope outside her barracks door. That wasn't there before. They waited until they were inside before opening it. The envelope contained several documents, satellite maps of a jungle region, handwritten field notes, and a letter from Captain James Westlake dated 1974. "To whom it may concern," Cruz read aloud. "If you're reading this, it means someone has finally asked the right questions about Elijah Rowe and Operation Firewell. The official record states that no American forces operated in the denied areas of Cambodia after 1970. The official record is a lie." Cole's eyes widened as Cruz continued reading. Lieutenant Rowe led a team designated Phantom Echo on 14 extraction missions between 1968 and 1974. These missions were officially denied but tacitly approved until they became politically inconvenient. When ordered to abandon American POWs in a camp near the Cambodian-Vietnamese border, Rowe refused. He and his team went in anyway, against direct orders. The letter detailed how Rowe's team successfully extracted 7 American prisoners but was then abandoned themselves, their extraction canceled by the same authorities who had disavowed the mission. Rowe got his men and the prisoners out through 200 miles of hostile territory over 26 days. Upon return, instead of medals, they received silence. Their records were altered, their unit disbanded. The men they saved were sworn to secrecy. The letter was signed, James Westlake, Captain, U.S. Navy, retired. Elijah Rowe's former commanding officer. "Jesus," Cole whispered. "So Elijah was a hero they tried to erase," Cruz finished. At the bottom of the envelope, they found a handwritten note from Briggs. "Now you know. Be careful who you trust with this. They're still watching." The next evening, Cruz received a radio message about a recruit in distress near the training marsh. Without hesitation, she headed out, only to find the area deserted when she arrived. "Hello," she called. "Anyone here?" A sudden movement behind her was all the warning she got before rough hands grabbed her, forcing a cloth over her mouth. She fought hard, landing solid blows against her attackers. But there were 3 of them, masked men in unmarked tactical gear. They dragged her toward the water, forcing her head under the murky surface. Lungs burning, vision darkening, Cruz felt consciousness slipping away when suddenly the pressure released. She broke the surface, gasping, to find a chaotic scene. A figure moved through her attackers with startling efficiency, not the wild brawling of a street fighter but the precise economical movements of elite combat training. One attacker was already down, another staggering backward with a dislocated shoulder, the third swinging wildly at the figure who stepped inside his guard with practiced ease. It was Elijah, moving with none of the stiffness he typically displayed around the compound. Each strike was calculated, each defensive move anticipating the next attack. Within seconds, all 3 assailants were incapacitated, and Elijah was helping Cruz to her feet. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice steady despite the exertion. Cruz coughed up marsh water, shaking her head. "How did you—" "I've been watching," Elijah said simply. "Since you started asking questions." He quickly checked the fallen men, removing their masks to reveal faces Cruz didn't recognize. Not compound. "Personnel, private contractors," Elijah muttered. "Hired guns." In the distance, voices called Cruz's name. A search party had been formed when she didn't return. "Go," Elijah said. "I was never here. These men attacked you, but you fought them off and they fled." "But, trust me," he insisted. "If they—" "No," I intervened. "It will only accelerate their timeline." Before Cruz could respond, Elijah melted into the darkness with a stealth that belied his age, leaving her alone with the unconscious attacker who hadn't managed to escape. The next morning, Malcolm Pryor arrived personally at Commander Briggs' office, flanked by 2 security personnel. Tall and imposing in his tailored suit, Pryor radiated authority and barely contained anger. "Your facility has a serious security breach, Commander," Pryor said without preamble. 3 of my security consultants were assaulted last night while conducting a routine perimeter check. Briggs maintained a neutral expression. "I wasn't aware your company had authorization to conduct security operations on this base, Mr. Pryor. My contract with Naval Special Warfare gives me broad latitude," Pryor replied coldly, "especially when it comes to protecting classified programs from compromise." He placed a folder on Briggs's desk. "I want recruits Cruz and Rawlins expelled, immediately, and the civilian maintenance worker Rowe removed from the premises." "On what grounds?" Briggs asked. "National security," Pryor snapped. "Or would you prefer I speak directly to Admiral Coulson about your accommodating attitude toward potential security risks?" The threat hung in the air. Briggs knew Coulson was deeply involved with Vance Defense Technologies funding. "I need time to process the paperwork," Briggs said carefully. "You have until tomorrow morning," Pryor replied, turning to leave. "After that, my team takes over." As Pryor exited, Briggs slumped in his chair, his face grim. He opened his desk drawer and removed an old photograph. Himself as a young ensign standing beside an athletic black man in jungle fatigues, both smiling despite the mud coating their faces. He stared at it for a long moment before picking up his phone. "Get me recruits Cruz and Rawlins. Immediately. And tell no one." Meanwhile, in the mess hall, Cole had reached his breaking point. After learning about Cruz's attack and seeing the bruises on her face, something had snapped inside him. He climbed onto a table, gaining everyone's attention. "I have something to say about the man we've been calling Gramps," he announced, voice carrying across the silent room. Logan stepped forward. "Stand down, Rawlins. You're making a fool of yourself." "No," Cole replied firmly. "We've been making fools of ourselves, mocking a man who deserves our respect." He looked around at the gathered recruits and instructors. "That old man you've been harassing? He wears the trident. He was a SEAL when most of your fathers were still in high school. He led missions that saved American lives, missions so classified they were erased from history." The instructors exchanged uncomfortable glances. One stepped forward to intervene, but Commander Briggs, who had just entered, raised a hand to stop him. "Let him speak," Briggs said quietly. Cole continued, gaining confidence. "We're supposed to embody the SEAL ethos here. Honor, courage, commitment. But what honor is there in tormenting an old warrior? What courage in ganging up on him?" The room remained silent, many recruits looking down in shame. "You want to know who Elijah Rowe really is?" Cole asked. "He's what we're all training to become, and most of us will fall short." At this, Briggs stepped forward. "He outranks us all," he said quietly. "We just didn't know it." Murmurs spread. Through the mess hall, Logan's face darkened with anger as he stalked out, shoving past recruits in his path. Later that afternoon, Cruz and Cole sat in Briggs's office, joined by Elijah, who stood quietly by the window. "I owe you an explanation," Briggs began, addressing Cruz and Cole. "And an apology." He turned to Elijah. "To all of you." He opened a desk drawer and removed a weathered folder stamped "Eyes Only" in faded red ink. "I was a young officer when Lieutenant Rowe led Phantom Echo," he said. "Not part of the team, I was too green, but I processed their mission reports. Officially, they conducted reconnaissance. Unofficially, we went where others couldn't," Elijah said, speaking for the first time. "Did what others wouldn't." Briggs nodded. When the political winds shifted, when those missions became inconvenient truths, the brass ordered everything buried, records altered, team members reassigned to remote posts or pressured out of service entirely. "And you went along with it," Cruz observed. Briggs looked down. "I was following orders. I didn't understand the cost until later." "Why is Elijah here now?" Cole asked. "After all these years?" "Because someone is trying to resurrect Phantom Echo," Elijah answered. "Not to save lives, but as a private enterprise. Deniable operations for profit." "Advanced defense technologies," Cruz realized aloud. "They're recruiting from this facility?" Briggs nodded grimly. "Malcolm Pryor heads their Special Projects Division. Logan Vance is their inside man, identifying candidates who show the right ethical flexibility." "But why target Elijah?" Cole pressed. "Because I know where the bodies are buried," Elijah said simply. "Literally and figuratively. And because my old team is still out there, the ones who survived. Pryor doesn't want anyone connecting those dots." A knock at the door interrupted them. Briggs's aide entered, looking concerned. "Sir, there's a situation. MPs are here with a warrant for Elijah Rowe's arrest, charges of sabotage and unauthorized presence in restricted areas." Briggs stood. "Stall them. Say he's being questioned about an unrelated matter." After the aide left, Briggs turned to Elijah. "We don't have much time." "I never expected any," Elijah replied calmly. "What do we do now?" Cruz asked. "You stay out of it," Elijah said firmly. "Both of you. This isn't your fight." "Like hell it isn't," Cole retorted. "They tried to drown Cruz. They're expelling us. We're already in this." "And we're not the only ones," Cruz added. "There are other recruits who've seen enough to know something's wrong." Briggs looked torn. "Pryor has powerful connections. This could end all your careers before they begin." "Some things matter more than careers," Cole said, glancing at Elijah. "You taught us that, Commander, through his example." Elijah studied them both, seeing determination in their eyes that reminded him of his own team, decades earlier. Finally, he nodded. "If you're in, you're all in," he warned. "No halfway." "We're in," Cruz said without hesitation. Cole nodded in agreement. Briggs opened a secure cabinet and removed a small hard drive. "Everything I've been able to gather on Pryor's operation. It's not much, but it's a start." Elijah took it with a nod of thanks. Outside, they heard the heavy footsteps of military police approaching. "Go out the back," Briggs told them. "I'll handle this." As Cruz and Cole slipped out through the rear door, Elijah paused, fixing Briggs, with an intense stare. "You know what happens when you corner a ghost, Commander?" he asked quietly. Briggs met his gaze. "What?" "He stops hiding." Elijah's voice carried absolute certainty. Then he was gone, following the recruits into the gathering darkness, leaving Briggs to face the MPs alone. In the compound security office, Logan watched the surveillance feed with growing anger. He grabbed his phone and dialed Pryor. "They're running," he reported. "The old man and those two recruits. Briggs is helping them." "Intercept them," Pryor ordered. "Use whatever force necessary. No one leaves that compound tonight." Logan smiled coldly. "With pleasure." The pre-dawn air hung, heavy with fog, as two military police vehicles rolled toward the compound's eastern gate. Between them was a prisoner transport van, its destination the naval brig 50 miles north. "Be advised, prisoner transfer commencing," the lead driver reported over the radio. "ETA to gate checkpoint 2 minutes." Inside the van, Elijah sat, with hands cuffed, flanked by armed guards. His expression remained impassive, his eyes fixed on the floor as the vehicle lurched over a pothole. The lead MP vehicle slowed as they approached a fallen tree blocking the access road. "Hold position," the officer ordered. "Let me check this out." As the officer stepped from his vehicle, the road suddenly plunged into darkness, the compound's perimeter lights cutting out simultaneously. The guards tensed, hands moving to weapons. "Ewen, the hell?" one muttered. A soft thump on the van's roof was their only warning before the rear doors flew open. In the chaos that followed, the guards never had a chance to fire a single shot. Precise strikes, to throat, temple, wrist, left them unconscious, but unharmed. "Move," a voice hissed from outside. Elijah stepped over the fallen guards, hands somehow free of the cuffs, and melted into the darkness. Behind him, the transport van's dashboard camera captured only shadows and static. When reinforcements arrived 15 minutes later, they found the vehicles intact, the guards restrained, with their own handcuffs and no sign of the prisoner or his rescuers. Malcolm Pryor slammed his fist on the desk as he reviewed the footage. "How does an old man overpower 4 armed MPs?" he demanded. The security chief cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, the camera evidence suggests he had help, at least 2 others." "Cruz and Rollins," Pryor growled. "Find them, now." He turned to Logan Vance, who stood silently at the back of the room. "You assured me this would be handled discreetly." "We underestimated them," Logan admitted stiffly. "No," Pryor corrected, eyes cold. "You did. I want every exit monitored, every inch of this compound searched. No one sleeps until Roe is found." As Pryor's team mobilized, 3 figures moved silently through the dense woods beyond the compound's northern perimeter. Cruz led the way, her training evident in each careful step. Cole followed, carrying a backpack filled with supplies hastily gathered during their escape. Elijah brought up the rear, his movements fluid and silent despite his age. 2 miles to the rendezvous point, Cruz whispered, consulting a small GPS device Briggs had provided. "You sure your contact will be there?" Cole asked Elijah. The old man nodded once. "Eddie Burke hasn't let me down in 40 years. He won't start now." They pushed deeper into the forest, avoiding trails and staying under the canopy to evade thermal imaging from drones that had begun circling overhead. After an hour of careful progress, they reached a small clearing where an ancient pickup truck sat waiting, its engine cold but ready. A grizzled white man with a silver beard emerged from behind a tree, shotgun lowered as he recognized Elijah. "Damn, Ghost," he said with a half-smile. "You look terrible." "Feel worse," Elijah replied, the ghost of a smile crossing his face. "Eddie, meet Cruz and Rollins." Eddie Burke nodded to the young recruits. "So these are the ones with enough sense to listen to you. Good, we're gonna need smart ones, Mart." "For what?" Cole asked. Eddie exchanged a look with Elijah before answering. "For waking the ghosts." The truck took them to a remote cabin set deep in the mountains, accessible only by a winding dirt road that would challenge even military vehicles. Inside, to Cruz and Cole's surprise, they found communications equipment that rivaled the compound's command center. "Welcome to Echo Nest," Eddie said as he fired up the systems. "Been maintaining this place since '78, just in case." "In case of what?" Cruz asked. "In case they ever came after us again," a new voice answered. They turned to see an Asian man in his 70s standing in the doorway, his wiry frame belying the strength still evident in his stance. "Sam Park," he introduced himself with a slight, "We're Phantom Echo, demolition specialist." Elijah stepped forward, clasping the man's hand firmly. "It's been too long, brother." 18 years, Sam agreed. "Not since Hayworth's funeral." Over the next hour, as Eddie worked the communications array, 2 more aging men arrived. Michael Winters, a tall black man with a prosthetic left leg, and Frank Delgado, a broad-shouldered man with deep laugh, lines and watchful eyes. "The gang's almost all here," Winters said, his deep voice filling the cabin. "Just like old times." Elijah's team, Phantom Echo, reunited after decades apart. As the night deepened, they gathered around a table where Elijah spread out maps and the hard drive information from Briggs. "Pryor's running a private military operation using SEAL training as a recruiting ground," Elijah explained to Cruz and Cole. "Black ops for hire, no oversight, no accountability." "Why come after you now?" Cole asked. After all these years? Because of what we know, Frank answered, tapping the map. Cambodia, 74, the mission they disavowed. We didn't just rescue those POWs, Sam continued. We found evidence of illegal weapons testing, chemical agents the U.S. officially denied developing. We documented everything, Elijah added. Filed it in our report before we knew they were going to bury the whole operation. And now Pryor's company has the contract to clean up old testing sites, Michael concluded. If that documentation ever surfaces, billions in liability, Cruz realized, plus criminal charges. Pryor can't risk exposure, Eddie said, turning from his computer. That's why he's been systematically erasing Phantom Echo from history, destroying records, discrediting survivors, and now hunting us directly, Elijah finished grimly. As dawn broke, Eddie received encrypted messages from his network of veterans and supporters. Phantom Echo cells, they called themselves. Reports flowed in. Compound security had been doubled, and Pryor had brought in private, military contractors to supplement the MPs. He's militarizing a training facility, Cruz said in disbelief as she reviewed drone footage smuggled out by sympathizers. And Briggs is letting him? Cole asked. Briggs is under house arrest, Eddie reported, reading from a secure channel. Official story is he's under investigation for security breaches. Elijah's expression darkened. Pryor's getting desperate. That means he'll make mistakes. Or become more dangerous, Sam cautioned. While the older men planned, Cruz pulled Cole aside. I need to tell you something, she said quietly. Some of the recruits are organizing resistance inside the compound. They reached out through Eddie's network. Who? Cole asked, surprised. Jackson's back. Turns out he was just locked in isolation, not gone. And Martinez, Lee, about a dozen others. They've been watching, listening. They know something's wrong. Cole nodded slowly. What are they planning? They need guidance, leadership, Cruz said. Someone to coordinate them with what we're doing out here. You're thinking of going back in, Cole realized, his face showing concern. One of us has to, Cruz replied. Before they could discuss further, Elijah called them back to the table. Pryor's forces are moving, he announced, pointing to a satellite feed. They've located one of our old dead drops near the compound. They're bringing in excavation equipment. If they find the documentation, Frank began. They won't, Elijah assured them. But they're getting close. We need to accelerate our timeline. The ATE plan they developed was audacious. While Elijah and his team would move to intercept Pryor's excavation crew, Cruz would covertly return to the compound to organize the sympathetic recruits. Cole would coordinate between the groups, establishing secure communications and supply lines. It's too dangerous, Cole argued when Cruz's role was explained. Pryor will be watching for you. That's why it has to be me, Cruz countered. They'll expect us to stay together. Splitting up gives us tactical advantage. Elijah studied her, with newfound respect. She thinks like us, Michael, he said to his teammate. Michael nodded. Reminds me of you in the old days. Too smart for her own good. Despite concerns, the plan was set in motion. That night, using Eddie's network of contacts, Cruz was smuggled back toward the compound in a supply truck, while Elijah and the team prepared to move against Pryor's excavation site. Before departing, Elijah took Cruz aside. Trust no one but your heart, he told her. When things get chaotic, and they will, that's your most reliable compass. Cruz nodded solemnly. I won't let you down. I know, Elijah replied. That's what worries me. As Cruz infiltrated the compound perimeter, the division among the recruits had become increasingly visible. Loyalty lines had been drawn. Those who supported the questioning of authority versus those who adhered strictly to the chain of command. Most of them aligned with Logan. Using the cover of darkness, Cruz contacted Jackson and the core group of resistors. They gathered secretly in the maintenance shed where Elijah had once tended the wounded Sparrow. The compound's being used as a recruiting ground for illegal operations, Cruz explained in hushed tones. Pryor is selecting candidates for off-book missions, things no oversight committee would approve. How can we be sure? One recruit asked. Cruz produced copies of the documents she'd smuggled back in. Commander Briggs confirmed everything before. They put him under house arrest. The evidence was compelling. Recruitment profiles marked with psychological assessments focusing on moral flexibility and extreme loyalty to direct command rather than ethical frameworks. Logan's been helping them, another recruit added. I saw him with Pryor reviewing personnel files after hours. As they formulated their resistance plan, none of them noticed the small camera hidden in the shed's light fixture, or the fact that Logan was watching their every move from the security office. Dawn broke as Pryor's excavation team began work at the old dead drop site. Heavy machinery tore into the earth as armed contractors formed a security perimeter around the operation. From their concealed position in the dense forest surrounding the site, Elijah and his team watched through binoculars. Just like the old days, Frank murmured. Outnumbered, outgunned. But not outclassed, Michael added with a grim smile. Sam checked his pack of improvised devices. Diversion charges are ready. Non-lethal, but they'll create plenty of confusion. Eddie, status on communications? Elijah asked. Eddie adjusted his headset. All clear. Cole is in position as relay between us and Cruz's team. Compound is on high alert, but they're organized and waiting for the signal. Elijah nodded, his mind calculating variables as he had countless times in hostile territory. Remember, our objective is the documentation only. No unnecessary engagement. As they prepared to move, Cole's urgent voice came through their comms. Abort! Abort! Cruz's team has been compromised. Logan took them during their meeting. Elijah's expression hardened. Details. He's got Cruz, Jackson, and 5 others locked in the old storage bunker. He's using them as bait. He knows we're monitoring their comms. He sent a message for you specifically. Let's hear it, Elijah said, his voice dangerously calm. Cole hesitated before playing the recording. Logan's voice, smug and confident. Hello, Ghost. I have your protege and her friends. Pryor wants to make a trade, them for whatever documentation you have from Cambodia. You have 3 hours before I start sending them back to you in pieces. Silence fell over the team as the message ended. It's a trap, Sam stated the obvious. Of course it is, Elijah agreed. But that doesn't change anything. Michael nodded his understanding. We go in anyway. Like Cambodia, Frank said quietly. Like Cambodia, Elijah confirmed. They abandoned their original plan, quickly developing a new strategy focused on the compound itself. While they worked, tensions inside the facility reached breaking point. In the administration building, Logan paced before the detained recruits, Cruz prominent among them with a split lip and defiant glare. You could have had an exceptional career, Logan told her. Selected for elite operations, positioned for rapid advancement. Instead, you chose a disgraced has-been. Better than choosing to be a mercenary's puppet, Cruz replied evenly. Logan's face darkened. He stepped closer, voice dropping to a menacing whisper. You have no idea what's really happening here. This isn't about money or power games. This is about creating a necessary force, operators who can act without the constraints of bureaucrats and politicians. You mean without ethics or oversight, Cruz countered. I mean without weakness, Logan snapped. Without the hesitation that gets men killed. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his face, a glimpse of personal pain quickly buried beneath practiced arrogance. Jackson, watching the exchange, spoke up. What happened to you, Vance? What made you Pryor's lapdog? Logan turned, sharply. My father died because some politician decided his operation was too politically sensitive for extraction. I learned then what Pryor has been saying all along. The system abandons its own when convenient. So you became what you hated, Cruz observed quietly. Before Logan could respond, his phone buzzed. Pryor's name flashed on the screen. They've spotted Rowe and his team approaching from the North Ridge, he reported after answering. Just as you predicted. Pryor's voice came through clearly enough for the captives to hear. Spring the trap. Maximum force authorized. I want Rowe alive if possible, but the others are expendable. Logan hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "Is there a problem, Mr. Vance?" Pryor demanded. "No, sir," Logan replied, recovering quickly. Proceeding as ordered. He pocketed the phone and addressed the security team. "Move the prisoners to the secondary location. I'm leading the intercept team personally." As Logan left, Cruz caught his eye. "It's not too late to choose differently," she said quietly. Something unreadable passed across Logan's face before his expression hardened once more. "It was too late the day they left my father to die," he replied, and then he was gone. Meanwhile, Elijah's team had split into 2 units. Michael and Frank created a diversion at the southern perimeter, drawing security forces with a series of controlled explosions and false heat signatures. Simultaneously, Elijah, Sam, and Eddie approached from the north, the very direction Pryor expected them, but with a crucial difference. "They're anticipating a covert approach," Elijah explained as they moved through the underbrush. "So we'll give them exactly what they don't expect." The compound's northern gate erupted in chaos as a supply truck, commandeered and driven by Eddie, crashed through the barrier at full speed. Security forces converged on the vehicle as Elijah and Sam used the confusion to slip through the breach, separated and approaching their target from different angles. Alarms blared across the facility. Pryor, monitoring from the command center, smiled coldly as reports flooded in. "Rowe's team is splitting up," a security officer reported. "One group at the south perimeter, another breaching north." "Just as anticipated," Pryor nodded. "Direct Logan's team to intercept Rowe at Building C. That's where he's headed, to the prisoners." But Elijah was not headed to Building C. While security forces converged on the expected routes, he moved like a shadow through service tunnels that hadn't appeared on any official blueprint for decades, passages he remembered from his earlier time at the facility. In the maintenance shed where Elijah had once tended the Sparrow, Sam quickly assembled his equipment. As Phantom Echo's demolitions expert, he'd spent decades perfecting non-lethal options. Within minutes, he'd rigged the compound's power distribution system for a cascading failure. "Ready on your mark," he whispered into his comm. "Hold position," Elijah's voice replied. "Wait for my signal." Elijah emerged from a utility tunnel directly into the administration building's basement, a blind spot in the security coverage. Moving silently up the stairs, he encountered a lone guard whom he subdued with practiced efficiency, a precise strike rendering the man unconscious before he could raise an alarm. Accessing a computer terminal, Elijah confirmed what he'd suspected. The prisoners weren't in Building C at all, but in the old underground storage bunker beneath the command center, where Pryor himself was coordinating the response. "Sam now," he whispered into his comm. Across the compound, lights flickered and died as Sam's cascade took effect. Emergency systems activated, bathing corridors in dim red lighting. Digital locks reset to manual operation. Surveillance cameras went dark. In the command center, Pryor cursed as monitors went black. "Get backup power online now." "Systems not responding, sir," a technician reported frantically. "Something's overriding the protocols." "It's him," Pryor realized, face paling slightly. "Secure this room," but it was too late. The door to the command center opened, revealing Elijah standing calmly in the threshold. Behind him, 2 security guards lay unconscious on the floor. "Hello, Malcolm," Elijah said quietly. "It's been a long time." Pryor's hand moved toward his sidearm, but Elijah's voice stopped him. "I wouldn't. Sam has rigged this entire building, with non-lethal suppressants. One wrong move activates them all." "What do you want?" Pryor demanded, attempting to maintain his authority despite the fear evident in his eyes. "The truth," Elijah replied simply. "About Cambodia, about Operation Firewell, about what happened after." Pryor's expression twisted. "You want the truth? The truth is you disobeyed direct orders. You compromised national security for your misguided heroics." "I saved American lives," Elijah countered calmly. "Lives you and your superiors were willing to sacrifice." "For the greater good," Pryor snapped. "Those men knew the risks. Their sacrifice would have secured our position with the Vietnamese government." "Their sacrifice? Or your promotion?" Elijah asked, stepping closer. "You were the liaison officer who canceled our extraction. You left us to die because the mission threatened your career advancement. The revelation hung in the air as the command. Center staff watched in stunned silence. Where are my people? Elijah asked, his voice carrying quiet menace. Before Pryor could answer, the door behind Elijah burst open. Logan stood there, weapon raised. Drop it, old man! Elijah didn't move, his eyes still fixed on Pryor. Your father was a good man, Logan. He wouldn't recognize what you've become. Logan's aim wavered slightly. You don't know anything about my father. William Vance, Force Recon. I pulled him out of a POW camp in '72, Elijah said quietly. He gave me this before we parted ways. He slowly reached into his pocket and withdrew a tarnished coin, a Marine Corps medallion with distinct notches cut into its edge. Logan's face drained of color. That's his lucky coin. He said he lost it. He gave it to the man who saved him, Elijah corrected gently. A man who disobeyed orders to leave him behind. The weapon in Logan's hand trembled visibly now. He died anyway, Logan said, voice cracking slightly. Years later, another operation, no extraction. And Pryor told you it was because of men. Like me, Elijah guessed. Men who wouldn't follow the system. Logan's eyes darted to Pryor, who remained stone-faced. He told me it was because of bleeding hearts in command who wouldn't authorize necessary measures, Logan admitted. He said his company would never abandon its operators like that. He lied, Elijah said simply. Malcolm Pryor was the officer who denied your father's extraction. I've seen the documentation. Logan's world seemed to collapse around him as he turned to Pryor. Is that true? It was a military necessity, Pryor began, but the excuse fell flat even to his own ears. The conflict in Logan's eyes resolved into cold clarity. In one fluid motion, he lowered his weapon from Elijah and turned instead to the control panel, entering an override code. Security doors throughout the facility unlocked, including the bunker holding Cruz and the others. You used me, Logan said to Pryor, his voice deadly quiet. You used my father's memory to make me your puppet. Pryor's hand moved suddenly to a concealed weapon, but Logan was faster. He tackled Pryor as the shot went wild, the two men crashing into equipment as they struggled. Go! Logan shouted to Elijah over his shoulder. Get your people out! I've got this. Elijah hesitated only a moment before disappearing down the corridor toward the bunker. When he arrived, Cruz and the others were already free, having taken advantage of the unlocked doors. Where's Logan? Cruz asked, noticing Elijah's expression. Making his choice, Elijah replied grimly. We need to move. Now, as they navigated the darkened corridors toward the extraction point, a deafening explosion rocked the command center behind them. Flames and smoke billowed from shattered windows. Cruz stopped, staring back at the destruction. Logan? Elijah placed a hand on her shoulder. He knew what he was doing. Their escape was chaos, alarms, gunfire, confusion. But with Sam's diversions, Eddie's coordination, and Michael and Frank providing covering fire from strategic positions, they made it to the rendezvous point where vehicles waited. As they sped away from the compound, Cruz looked back at the facility now partially engulfed in flames. What happened back there? With Logan? He found his honor, Elijah said quietly. Sometimes that's all we can hope for. Miles away, as dawn broke over the mountains, they regrouped at a secondary safe house. Reports came in confirming Pryor had survived, but was severely injured. The compound was in disarray with conflicting chains of command and spreading rumors about the night's events. And the documentation? Michael asked. Elijah patted his pocket where he'd secured a small flash drive, right where we left it all those years ago, in plain sight on the wall of honor, inside the frame of our missing team photo. What now? Cole asked, the question on everyone's mind. Before Elijah could answer, Eddie burst into the room, his face ashen. We've got a problem, a big one. He turned up the volume on his communications array, where an intercepted transmission played clearly. Package secured. Transporting to Site Bravo for questioning. Phantom Echo survivors are the priority targets now. They've captured someone. Frank realized aloud. Eddie nodded grimly. One of our old team, and that's not all. He pulled up a satellite image on his monitor, revealing a heavily fortified compound deep in the mountains. I've identified Site Bravo. It's not just a detention facility. It's where they're holding all of them. All of who? Cruz asked, though the growing dread in her stomach told her she already knew. The rest of Phantom Echo, Elijah answered, his voice tight with controlled emotion. The men they told us were dead. Our brothers. They've been prisoners all this time. The room fell silent as the revelation sank in. For Elijah and his team, the mission had just become deeply personal. They're using them as bait, Michael said. Finally. They know we'll come. Of course we will, Elijah replied, steel in his voice. Just like Cambodia, we leave no one behind. The mountain air hung crisp and cold around the remote cabin as dawn broke. Inside, Elijah and his team pored over satellite imagery of Site Bravo, a fortified compound nestled in a valley 20 miles north. 3 guard towers, motion sensors along the perimeter, and at least 20 armed personnel, Michael noted, tracing the facility's outline on the map. This isn't just a detention site, it's a black site. Electronic countermeasures too, Eddie added, checking his equipment readings. They're jamming most frequencies within a 2-mile radius. Sam studied the approach routes. Terrain works. Against us. Exposed slopes on 3 sides, steep cliff face on the 4th. They'll see us coming. Not if we don't come from the ground, Elijah said quietly. All eyes turned to him as he pointed to a ridgeline overlooking the compound. Halo insertion here, under cover of the storm front moving in tomorrow night. We drop in darkness, using the weather as cover. Frank shook his head. We're not exactly in our prime for high-altitude jumps anymore, Ghost. That's why we're not all going, Elijah replied. Small team, surgical approach. I'll take point. Not alone you won't, Cole interjected firmly. I've got Halo certification. I'm going with you. Elijah studied the young recruit's face, seeing determination that reminded him of himself decades ago. After a moment, he nodded. Sam comes too. We'll need his expertise with their security systems, Elijah decided. Michael and Frank coordinate ground support and exfiltration. Eddie maintains communications relay from here. Cruz, who had been silently studying the satellite feeds, looked up. What about me? You have the most important job, Elijah told her. You take the documentation we recovered and get it to Commander Briggs's contact at Naval Intelligence. If we don't make it back, that evidence is our insurance policy. Cruz started to protest, but the look in Elijah's eyes stopped her. This wasn't negotiable. How many prisoners are we talking about? Cole asked, returning to the mission parameters. Eddie pulled up thermal imaging captured during a satellite pass. Heat signatures suggest 6 individuals in the north quadrant of the facility, consistent with detention cells. Minimal movement patterns indicate restraints or limited mobility. 6, Elijah repeated, a mixture of pain and hope crossing his face. That matches our missing team members. Michael placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. After all these years, could they really have kept them alive this whole time? They're valuable assets, Frank reasoned. Former SEAL operators with specialized training, Pryor's company probably, used them as training resources, interrogation subjects, maybe even experimental test cases. The thought hung heavy in the air, making their resolve even stronger. We have 24 hours to plan and prep, Elijah stated, his voice taking on the command tone that came naturally after years of leadership. Every contingency, every detail, we get one shot at this. While they prepared, Cruz took Elijah aside. There's something you should know before you go. The recruits at the compound, they're organizing under Jackson's leadership. After Logan's sacrifice, many who were on the fence have switched sides. What are they planning? Elijah asked. They're going to take control of the facility from Pryor's remaining forces, create enough chaos to divide attention from your mission at Site Bravo. Elijah considered this. That puts them at significant risk. They know, Cruz affirmed. They made their choice. The same one you made in Cambodia. doing what's right over what's ordered. A hint of pride flickered in Elijah's eyes. Tell them to wait for our signal. Coordinate with Eddie on timing. The next 24 hours passed in meticulous preparation. Equipment was checked and rechecked, entry and exit routes memorized, contingency plans established. Despite their age, Elijah and his team moved with the practiced precision of men who had never truly left the battlefield, muscle memory and tactical thinking as sharp as ever. Meanwhile, at the compound, Jackson gathered his growing coalition of recruits in the underground maintenance tunnels, away from surveillance. Their numbers had swelled to over 30, more than half the active trainees. Tomorrow night we take back our facility, he told them quietly. Not for ourselves, but for what it represents, the true values of the service we joined. Honor, courage, commitment. What about the instructors? A recruit asked. Some are still loyal to Pryor. We focus on the private contractors first, Jackson explained. Most instructors will stand down once they understand what's happening. Remember, minimal force. These are Americans, just confused about who deserves their loyalty. Back at the cabin as dusk approached on mission day, Elijah found Cole checking his equipment one final time. Having second thoughts? Elijah asked. Cole looked up. No, sir. Just want to make sure I don't let you down. You know the odds of this working aren't good, Elijah said frankly. I've lost men on operations with better odds than this. Is that supposed to scare me off? Cole asked with a hint of defiance. No, it's supposed to make sure you're going for the right reasons, Elijah replied. Fear and bravado get men killed. Purpose keeps them alive. My purpose is clear, Cole said. Those men have been abandoned by their country once already. I won't be part of abandoning them again. Elijah nodded, satisfied. Get some rest. We jump in 4 hours. As Cole left, Cruz approached Elijah with a small package. Before you go, there's something I want you to have. Inside was a carefully folded American flag patch, worn but clean. It was my father's, she explained. He carried it on every mission. Said it reminded him what he was fighting for. Elijah accepted it solemnly. I'll bring it back to you. You better, she replied, voice firm despite the emotion in her eyes. All of you. That night, as storm clouds gathered on the horizon, a small unmarked helicopter lifted off from a clearing 5 miles from the cabin. Inside, Elijah, Cole, and Sam sat in silence, each man lost in his own thoughts as they ascended toward the jump altitude. At the compound, Jackson's team initiated their operation. Using knowledge of the facility's infrastructure, they systematically disabled security systems and isolated Pryor's remaining forces. The storm knocked out power, forcing systems to emergency backups, creating the perfect distraction. At 20,000 feet, the helicopter door slid open. Wind howled as rain began to pelt the aircraft. Elijah, Cole, and Sam checked each other's equipment one final time before moving to the door. On my mark, Elijah shouted above the wind. Remember, 90-second freefall. Deploy at 6,000 feet. Steer for the North Ridge. Cole and Sam nodded, faces set with determination behind their oxygen masks. Go, Elijah commanded, and they plunged into the stormy darkness. The free fall was disorienting. Wind, rain, and cloud cover, making visual navigation nearly impossible. They relied on altimeters and years of training, maneuvering through the turbulent air toward their target. At 6,000 feet, parachutes deployed. The sudden deceleration jolted Cole, but he recovered quickly, adjusting his lines to compensate for the crosswinds. Through breaks in the clouds, he glimpsed Site Bravo below, a collection of lights amidst the darkness of the surrounding forest. Their landing was textbook precision, despite the challenging conditions. Within minutes, they had buried their chutes and begun their approach to the facility. Eddie, comms check, Elijah whispered into his throat mic. Reading you 5 by 5, Eddie's voice crackled in their earpieces. Compound operation is underway. You have approximately 30 minutes before Pryor's people realize something bigger is happening. Sam led them to a maintenance access point he had identified from the schematics, a ventilation system for the facility's generator room. As Site Bravo's youngest builder, It had fewer of the retrofitted security measures found in newer black sites. "Cutting now," Sam murmured, applying a specialized thermal tool to the grate. "Silent breach in 3, 2, 1. The grate came, free, and they slipped inside, navigating the tight confines of the ventilation system until they reached an access panel above a utility corridor. "Guards?" Elijah asked. Cole, using a fiber optic camera, checked the hallway. 2, stationary at the junction, 50 feet north. Elijah nodded. "Standard approach. Sam, systems? Ready to trigger a localized power fluctuation on your mark. Execute." The lights in the corridor flickered and died. Before the emergency systems could engage, Elijah and Cole had dropped from the ceiling and neutralized both guards with practiced efficiency, precise strikes rendering them unconscious without noise. They moved quickly through the facility, using Sam's electronic countermeasures to create blind spots in the security coverage. Each checkpoint brought them closer to the detention area indicated by the thermal signatures. Meanwhile, at the training compound, the situation had escalated rapidly. Jackson's team had secured the main administrative building and communications center, but Pryor's loyalists were putting up fierce resistance around the armory. "We need to hold them back," Jackson ordered his team. "Keep the pressure on so they can't send reinforcements to Site Bravo." Inside Site Bravo, Elijah's team reached the detention wing. A reinforced door with electronic lock stood between them and their objective. 8-digit rotating encryption, Sam whispered, examining the panel. "I can bypass it, but it'll take time we don't have." Elijah studied the door, then touched a small scar above his eyebrow, an old tell his teammates would recognize. "We're not bypassing it," he decided. "We're using their security against them." He explained his plan quickly. Minutes later, Sam triggered a fire suppression system in an adjacent sector. As expected, 2 security personnel rushed to investigate. Passing through the detention wing, Cole, positioned in an alcove, created a momentary distraction, while Elijah incapacitated the lead guard. The second turned, reaching for his weapon, but Sam was already there, a precise strike to the pressure point at the base of the skull dropping him instantly. Using the guard's credentials, they finally accessed the detention wing. What they found inside stopped them cold. 6 men in medical beds connected to monitoring equipment, some with feeding tubes and IVs. They appeared unconscious but alive. Faces gaunt, bodies thin from years of confinement, but undeniably the missing members of Phantom Echo. "My God," Sam whispered, approaching the nearest bed. "It's David and Richard. They're all here." Elijah moved to the central bed where a dark-skinned man lay, his face lined with years of suffering but still recognizable as William Harris, Elijah's former second-in-command. "Will," Elijah said softly, gripping his old friend's hand. "We're here, brother. We came back for you." To their surprise, Will's eyes fluttered open. Recognition dawned slowly in his gaze. "Ghost," he rasped, voice weak from disuse. "Took you. Long enough." A ghost of a smile crossed Elijah's face. Traffic was hell. The moment was interrupted by an alarm blaring throughout the facility. On the monitoring screens, they saw security forces converging on their position. "We've been made," Cole reported, checking the hallway. "Multiple hostiles inbound, heavily armed." "How mobile are they?" Elijah asked Sam, who was checking the medical readouts. "They've been kept in medically induced comas, likely awakened periodically for interrogation," Sam replied grimly. "They can move, but not well. We'll need to carry them." Elijah made a quick decision. "Sam, set up a defensive position at the EO. Main entrance. Cole, help me disconnect these monitors carefully. We need them stable for transport." As they worked frantically to prepare the prisoners for evacuation, Eddie's voice came through their comms. "Ghost, be advised, we have a serious problem. Pryor is en route to your location via helicopter. ETA 12 minutes. And he's not alone. He's brought a strike team." Outside, the storm had intensified, rain lashing against the facility as thunder rolled across the mountains. Perfect extraction weather under normal circumstances, the weather would mask their movement and impair pursuit. But with 6 weakened prisoners to transport, the conditions became another obstacle. Adjust extraction plan, Elijah ordered. We need vehicle support closer to the facility. Working on it, Eddie replied. Michael and Frank are moving the trucks to the lower access road, 4 minutes out. Will Harris, more lucid than the others, grasped Elijah's arm. There's something you need to know, he said urgently. Pryor, he has a fail-safe. If the facility is compromised, he'll eliminate all evidence. What kind of fail-safe? Elijah demanded. Airstrike, Will whispered. Drone already on station. They'll level this place with us in it. The information changed everything. They now faced a deadline more pressing than pursuit. They had to evacuate before Pryor could authorize the strike. New plan, Elijah decided. Cole, get our people moving toward the south exit. Sam, I need you to access their communications array and jam the drone control frequency. What about you? Cole asked, already helping one of the prisoners to his feet. I'm going to create a diversion, Elijah replied, checking his weapon. Buy you time to get clear. That's a suicide mission, Cole protested. This isn't a debate. Recruit, Elijah said firmly. Get them out. That's an order. Something in Elijah's tone brooked no argument. Cole nodded reluctantly and began the evacuation process, supporting the weakened SEALs as they struggled to walk after years of confinement. Elijah moved in the opposite direction, toward the facility's security center. Using techniques honed over decades of operations, he navigated through the chaos, eliminating threats with non-lethal precision when necessary, avoiding detection when possible. Outside, Michael and Frank had arrived with the extraction vehicles, positioning them at the rendezvous point while engaging Pryor's perimeter forces in a series of hit-and-run attacks to draw attention away from the south exit. At the compound, crews received word that the Site Bravo operation was in jeopardy. Unable to remain on the sidelines, she made a decision. Jackson, she called over the secure channel. I need your best tactical driver and a vehicle, fast. Where are you going? He asked. To make sure our people come home, she replied, already moving toward the motor pool. Elijah reached the security center to find it already in chaos. Monitors showed multiple breach points throughout the facility, as Michael and Frank's diversionary attacks stretched the defensive perimeter thin. On one screen, a helicopter approached through the storm. Pryor had arrived. Working quickly, Elijah accessed the main terminal. Years might have passed, but the fundamentals of security systems hadn't changed much. Within minutes, he had locked down critical sections of the facility, trapping Pryor's reinforcements in isolated corridors while clearing an escape route for his team. Sam, status? He demanded into his comm. Drone communications successfully jammed, Sam reported, but it's temporary. They're already working to re-establish control. 10 minutes, maybe less. Cole, we've got everyone moving, slow going, but we're approaching the south exit. Michael and Frank are in position for pickup. Good, Elijah acknowledged. I'll meet you at the rendezvous point. But as he turned to leave, the security center door slid open. Malcolm Pryor stood there flanked by 2 operatives, his face twisted with rage and desperation. You've been a thorn in my side for too long, Roe, he snarled, weapon raised. 40 years and counting, Elijah replied calmly, assessing his options. 3 armed opponents, minimal cover, no clear exit. You know what your problem always was? Pryor asked, taking a step forward. You never understood the bigger picture. Some lives have to be sacrificed for national interests. Strange how those sacrifices never included you, Elijah observed. Pryor's face darkened. I've dedicated my life to this country's security. No, Elijah contradicted. You've dedicated your life to power and profit. There's a difference. Outside, Cole and Sam had successfully evacuated the prisoners to the waiting vehicles. Rain poured down as Michael and Frank helped the weakened men into the trucks. Where's Ghost? Michael demanded, looking back toward the facility. Still inside, Cole replied grimly. Creating a diversion. Frank checked his watch. Drone strike could come any minute. We need to move. Not without him, Sam insisted. Inside the security center, Elijah had managed to disarm one of Pryor's men, using him as a shield while retreating toward a secondary exit. Pryor pursued relentlessly, his obsession with eliminating Elijah overriding tactical sense. You can't escape, Pryor called. The facility is locked down. You mean like this? Elijah replied, hitting the emergency evacuation override. Instantly, alarms blared and fire suppression systems activated throughout the building, creating chaos as all electronic doors defaulted to open status. Using the distraction, Elijah made his break, moving through the flooding corridors toward the exit. Behind him, Pryor followed, abandoning his remaining operative in his single-minded pursuit. Outside, a new vehicle screeched to a halt beside the extraction trucks. Cruz jumped out, scanning the facility anxiously. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Still, inside," Cole answered. "We have to go. The drone could strike any minute." "Not without him," Cruz insisted, echoing Sam's earlier sentiment. Before anyone could stop her, she was running toward the facility, rain plastering her hair to her face as she charged into the danger zone. Inside, Elijah had reached the south corridor when Pryor cornered him, weapon trained on his chest. "End of the line, Ghost," Pryor sneered. His finger tightened on the trigger. A sudden impact from behind sent Pryor stumbling forward. Cruz had arrived, tackling him with all her strength. The weapon discharged, the bullet grazing Elijah's arm instead of finding his heart. In the struggle that followed, Pryor regained his footing, now training his weapon on Cruz. "Another hero," he spat. "Just as foolish as your mentor." "Not foolish," Cruz replied, standing her ground. "Loyal." Something flickered in Pryor's eyes. Perhaps recognition that he'd never inspired such loyalty. Only fear. Before he could fire, Elijah's voice cut through the tension. "It's over, Malcolm," he said, holding up a small device. "I've just transmitted the Cambodia files to every major news outlet and intelligence oversight committee. The drone strike you're waiting for, it's been redirected." "You're bluffing," Pryor snarled, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Am I?" Elijah asked calmly. "Check your secure channel." Pryor hesitated, then tapped his earpiece. What he heard drained the color from his face. "That's right," Elijah confirmed. "Your authorization codes have been revoked pending investigation. Your private army is standing down as we speak. The NSA has already secured your servers." "Impossible," Pryor whispered. "I had 40 years to plan this," Elijah reminded him. "Did you think I came back just to fix plumbing?" In a final act of desperate rage, Pryor lunged toward them, but Cruz was ready. A perfectly executed takedown left Pryor face down on the floor, stunned and defeated. "Nice form," Elijah noted appreciatively. "I had a good teacher," Cruz replied, with the hint of a smile. Together, they secured Pryor and made their way to the extraction point, emerging from the facility just as a convoy of official vehicles approached. Not Pryor's private forces, but naval intelligence, led by Commander Briggs himself. "Cutting it close, Ghost," Briggs called through the rain. "Dramatic timing," Elijah replied. "Always was my weakness." In the aftermath, as dawn broke over the mountains, the full scope of the operation came into focus. Pryor was in custody, facing charges of treason, kidnapping, and human rights violations. His network was being dismantled, his political protectors scattering in the face of overwhelming evidence. At the training compound, now secured by Jackson and his coalition, the returning team was met with respectful silence as the rescued SEALs were carefully transferred to medical transports. Years of captivity had taken their toll, but doctors were optimistic about their recovery. Will Harris, stronger than the others, approached Elijah as they prepared to depart. "You never gave up," he said quietly. "Phantoms don't disappear," Elijah replied, clasping his old friend's hand. "Not the real ones." In the days that followed, healing began, not just for the rescued men, but for the institution they had served. Commander Briggs, reinstated with commendations, initiated a comprehensive review of training protocols, emphasizing ethical leadership alongside tactical excellence. Cruz offered a leadership position in the reformed program, accepted with one condition: that the true story of Phantom Echo be taught to every recruit as a lesson in both the cost and meaning of service. Cole, forever changed by the experience, found himself drawn to a new specialization: recovery operations for personnel left behind. The lessons from Elijah shaped his approach to command and duty. And Elijah himself? He chose to fade back into the shadows, visiting only the small memorial garden, where they placed a marker for Logan Vance, acknowledging his final act of courage. On his last day at the compound, Elijah stood before the Wall of Honor, now restored with all the missing photographs in their rightful places, including the full Phantom Echo team, their service finally acknowledged. Cruz found him there, contemplative, in the morning light. "Will you disappear again?" she asked. "Ghosts never truly disappear," he replied. "We just find different shadows to haunt," she smiled slightly. "The recruits are asking for you. They want to hear your stories." "My stories aren't all suitable for telling," Elijah warned. "Then tell them what they need to hear," Cruz suggested. "About honor, about never leaving anyone behind." Elijah considered this, then nodded slowly. "One lesson, then I'm gone." Before departing, he pressed something into Cruz's palm, a small tattoo of the Phantom Echo emblem. "For those who need to remember," he said quietly. That evening, as Elijah walked away from the compound for the final time, he passed a young recruit staring at his photograph on the Wall of Honor with reverence. "I hear the ghost is back," the recruit whispered to a companion. Elijah allowed himself a small smile as he continued walking, disappearing into the gathering dusk, a phantom once more, but this time, one who had made peace with his shadows. Miles away, on a distant hillside overlooking the ocean, a figure watched the compound through binoculars, a woman with cold eyes and a familiar bearing, Malcolm Pryor's daughter, studying the facility with calculated interest. "Enjoy your victory, phantoms," she murmured, lowering the binoculars. "Ghosts aren't the only things that return from the dead." She turned away, walking toward a waiting helicopter, already planning the next chapter in a story that, like all ghost stories, was not quite finished. Would you sacrifice everything, career, recognition, even your own legacy, to save lives others have deemed expendable? If this story of forgotten heroes and quiet courage moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of honor found in unexpected places.